And to be this bully, we're not going to let you have another 4 years of that.
Okay, Rick Wilson, I want to make sure I get you in, also just responding to the same question and also just responding to Ben. What do you think?
First off, Ben's answer to you betrays a level of naivety about nuclear weapons and about the Korean Peninsula in specific that is utterly staggering. That was some weapons-grade stupidity right there. Because the fact of the matter is, you don't threaten people. The deterrence model is this: you say to another country, if you hit me with nuclear weapons, I will respond. Therefore, neither country does it. You don't say, if you talk bad about me, if you threaten me, I could respond with fire and fury. That's not a code word for some little tap on the wrist. That's a code word for the first use of nuclear weapons. This is entirely out of the bounds of what a nation like ours should do. We could level North Korea into a shimmering plane of glass.
And it doesn't mean that we're going to use nuclear weapons. This is the part where I say you're being irresponsible, because you're saying that the only option America had would be nuclear weapons.
No,
if
Ben, I didn't say that at all.
If you know anything about what we would do with North Korea, it would probably be going after the bunkers that carry
it. In fact, deterrence and diplomacy have worked for this country for generations. And the fact of the matter is, the failures of administrations of both parties over the last 25 years have led North Korea to be where it is now.
No,
you cannot argue.
You're saying that over the last 8 years,
a military strike on North Korea, even in a non-nuclear strike, will not result in the deaths of millions of South Koreans, hundreds, 100,000 Americans.
Listen to one thing you just said here.
Ben, listen, this is a matter by which you have displayed your absolute ignorance of the Korean Peninsula.
You can name call all you want to, but you're not talking about the reality of the facts.
We're a military operation. This is not something where a military operation that you throw off the back.
Let me go back into the point that the president was making.
Could possibly lead to anything except incredibly damaging and horrifying.
Let me go back into the point.
South Korea.
Okay, let me go back in the point here. What you're missing, obviously, is you're implying that somehow over the last 8 years, our policy of 100% diplomacy and deferring to Japan and the United Nations has somehow been a success. It's been a total failure. You and I wouldn't be having this conversation right now if it wasn't for the fact that they've been able to do exactly what they've done with their nuclear program, and including have the ability to reach half the United States of America. If we keep going down the road that you're going down and what you're saying is successful, then what does failure look like to you? 60 nuclear weapons you're saying is successful? Having half of America be reached by North Korea is successful?
I just said that the failures of administrations of both parties for the last 25 years in the Korean Peninsula have led us to this point. The fact of the matter is, though, that when you get to the level where you're joking about nuclear weapons and fire and fury, you're in a whole different zone. You're in a whole different
fire
zone,
and fury.
And it requires
this is again where you're
and judgment, none of which Donald Trump has in his strong suit. And
with all due respect,
he's sitting there
with
saying
all due
fire
respect,
and fury. That is a threat of
fire
a
and
preemptive
fury.
Nuclear strike. Are you in favor of a
again? This is where you're being chicken little. The sky is falling.
Preemptive nuclear strike on the Korean Peninsula.
Listen to the words coming out of my mouth.
Do you favor a Korean? Do you favor
listen to the words coming out of my mouth if you're going to ask a dumb question.
Do you favor a preemptive strike, Ben?
Okay,
it's a simple question. Yes or no?
Again,
do you favor a preemptive nuclear strike?
It's not as simple as that. You're turning this into second grade here. It's not as simple as what you're saying. There are other options on the table. There are other options.
You love the guy. That's
you obviously don't care what anyone else says.
That's a great idea.
Okay, I'm going to finish now.
Hang on, Rick.
It's simple, Ben.
Rick, hang on. Let Ben have a moment.
Listen carefully, because you're having a hard time understanding this. There are other options militarily besides only nuclear options. Fire and fury does not necessarily mean only push the red button for a nuclear war. It is incredibly incompetent and ignorant to imply that the only option that our military has is to actually do nuclear war. That is not what the president said yesterday. That is not what the president said yesterday. You're implying that there's only one option. There is more than one option.
Let's ask Rick. Let me cut through this for a second. Ben, I totally understand the point you're making and how, Rick, you're arguing against it. But so, to Ben's point, if, the diplomacy thus far has not been working, what, in your opinion, and you have the State Department saying, let's give it a shot, let's get North Korea at the table, in your opinion, what is the best option here?
Look, you have to move this into a deterrence frame. And a deterrence frame is not threatening a preemptive strike. A deterrence frame is...
So do what we're still doing right now.
Weapons are deployed and used by North Korea. If nuclear weapons are deployed and used by North Korea, then a nuclear response is on the table. But you don't lay it out there. And look, was not talking about he was not talking about a conventional strike. You're
telling me that
hardly coded.
You're telling me the only time that the president can use the words fire and fury is literally if nuclear weapons are in the air. Are you literally kidding me right now?
You're going to pull something
that is the worst foreign policy I've ever heard in my entire life.
Ben, there are boundaries and there are ways you talk about deterrence. General Mattis did it right today. Donald Trump shot from the lip, as he usually does, because he is ignorant of history, he's ignorant of strategy, he is ignorant of diplomacy, and he's certainly ignorant of the
you don't like Donald Trump,
of deterrence
but the foreign policy you're describing, the foreign policy that you're describing has been a failure over the last year. When the president says he's going to protect and defend the United States of America, and then the only option you give the president is nuclear war, that just shows that you have no understanding of war.
The option is deterrence. The option is active deterrence and diplomacy.
We've done sanctions to this point.
Let's move.
Ben, if you strike North Korea with conventional weapons, Ben, if you strike, and I ask you this question, if you strike North Korea with conventional weapons, you understand that the most heavily armored area of the world for artillery is on the South Korean border with North Korea. They will slog the hell out of South Korea, out of Seoul. This is not going to be pretty. And you're saying that you think there are no consequences to this kind of action, and it's really irresponsible.
No.
I want to stop. I want to just pivot, please. Let me just ask Ben to you, and then Rick, I want you to weigh in on the different messaging, right, coming out of the White House. So you have the language, fire and fury, that the president uses. Then you have the language that we've heard from both Tillerson and from Mattis. It's not all entirely on the same page. I don't know if you guys were listening to Admiral Kirby a second ago on how, I mean, essentially it's been a catch-up situation as this was off the cuff, Ben. So can you speak to the issue of
I think the
not all being on the same page?
I think the president was being blunt and off the cuff. It was very clear from how he said that it was off the cuff, but I do think the tone
should you be off the cuff on North Korea?
I think the words that people have obsessed with him saying are fire and fury are words that, you know what, do you want him to use a different word? His point was to speak directly to Kim Jong-un and to make it very clear that it is a new day. You're not going to get away.
He didn't give his administration a heads up. He didn't give his administration a heads up on using that kind of language about North Korea.
Let me say this. I think that there are multiple ways that you can deal with diplomacy. Only having a kumbaya diplomacy that we've gone, which is go to Japan, go to the United Nations, and all of a sudden we'll kind of set back a little bit. That has been a failure to the point where half of America is now at risk, and you have a crazy guy with nuclear weapons that he can actually deliver in a real capacity.
I know, but that still doesn't mean that the president should be speaking off the cuff on North Korea.
My point is, his policy is we're going to be tough. Now, can you have good cop, bad cop with the State Department?
Right.
Absolutely. I think that's what you've seen today. I think what Tillerson is doing today, well, I think you have to have more than just one avenue to talk to Kim Jong-un, because the one avenue of sole diplomacy has gotten us nowhere but a crazy guy who now has nuclear weapons that he can deliver to half the United States of America. It did not work for 8-9 years. We've literally been doing it since the end of the Bush time. So you're talking 9+ years, 9.5 to be conservative, and now he has more of an arsenal than he's ever had before, even while sanctions have been imposed, and we have new sanctions. You can do two things at once.
Rick,
but the president is not going to sit there and be bullied by them.
What do you think of the good cop, bad cop
as he always does, the president, as he always does, shot from the lip. He was riffing. He was whatever impulsive thing that drove him at that moment. And so, yes, you had to see the entire administration play catch-up. And in a matter as consequential as a potential nuclear exchange, you have to have probity, and you have to have judgment, and you have to have discipline. And Donald Trump has never displayed those at any point in his life or his career. And so everybody that's scrambling, and by the way, I've talked to some of my friends in the military today who are in this world, and the sense was, oh, dear God. It wasn't, hey, this is great, let's get on board with this great policy. It was, oh, dear God, this guy has no idea what he's doing.
There was no policy that was announced. It was the president defending the fact that you have a leader that has nuclear weapons that he can deliver.
Policy.
The policy of saying, if you continue to come after America or if you threaten America, we will defend yourself, is a policy that I'm pretty sure almost every president in my lifetime has had.
He didn't mean,
it's not a new policy.
When he said fire and fury, he didn't mean a sternly worded letter.
So be kind and give him a hug and send him a gift? Is that what you want diplomacy to be for a guy with nuclear weapons?
Hey,
we love you?
You really believe that's what I'm suggesting?
I mean, that's a foreign policy over the last 9 years that has been a failure. So we have nuclear weapons that guy has now. So I would say it might be time to try something different.
You are unbelievably irresponsible and ignorant of the Korean Peninsula. It's astounding.
Okay. On that, we're going to go. Rick Wilson.